Excellent. An ale for me. And for my officers. In fact, ales for everyone.
10 Backward. With Rick and Will and Gemma.
Oh, yes.
Hello, welcome to another episode of 10Backward, the UK-based podcast all about Star Trek. I'm Rick Everson, and to my right is Gemma Turland.
Hello.
To her right is Will Turland.
Hello.
And then, reversing course, back round to my left is Rick Palmer.
Greetings.
Today, we are going to talk about the Prime Directive, General Order Number 1. I thought it was a fairly meaty topic, it'd be quite good. We also knew it was one we'd get a lot of discussion out of, so we've pre-decided to go back to what we used to do ages ago, where we split episodes across 2, 3, in one case even 4 episodes, when we talked about war.
I don't think we've really planned that. I think
We
that
didn't
just
have it.
happened.
This time we have planned it.
Yes.
So our Prime Directive discussion is going to be 2 parts, unless we do ramble on so much it becomes 3, but hopefully 2. So our first part, we're going to talk a bit about breaking the Prime Directive, and I like to subtitle this one, Don't Worry, Be Happy, based on an old Star Trek parody book I once read, where it defined the Prime Directive in the original series as Don't Worry, Be Happy, and in the Next Gen as Put Things Back Where You Found Them. So, but before we get on to breaking it, I thought we'd just have a little chat about what we think the Prime Directive is, what it means generally, what do we take away from Star Trek as we've watched it as the Prime Directive meaning. I think it's essentially don't muck about with other cultures' development.
Yeah.
In
I'd
very
agree with
broad
that.
terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Done. Right.
I
Thank
think
you
it's
for listening. We're off.
I think from a creative point of view, and it's a plot device. And in the universe, I think it's sort of an insurance policy against interference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's a rule to stop good intentions turning bad, and a sort of a short-sighted, short-term good intention having unforeseen consequences, and basically sort of saying sometimes situations are really, really complicated, like more complicated than maybe one starship captain can understand. It's like Brexit. Maybe one person can't just say, well, let's just do it this way, because maybe it's just really complicated. Maybe that one person hasn't got a view on how all the possible scenarios are going to play out. So maybe, just don't.
I was rather than touch that hot potato, I was going to compare it to sort of say ecosystems and things in the natural world, where we blunder in, think we're doing one thing but chopping a few trees down. Shit, we've made 4 species of animals go extinct because we didn't think about the habitats and the effect this was going to have.
Yeah.
So where we come across a nice culture, not achieved warp drive yet, don't really think there's alien life. We don't blunder in and say, hey, guess what? There is alien life. Because what would happen? Could be riots, could be all sorts of social upheaval and unrest. We could mess them up. So it seems reasonable.
And it seems like a way of combating the arrogance of maybe one person to think that they know better and that they can make a change for a society. Look at this stupid society and the stupid things they're doing. All they need to do is do it this way.
Yes, definitely.
Wipe hands, job done, see ya. Yeah. And then like 10 years later, oh no, I hadn't thought of that, it's all gone wrong.
It's to prevent sort of a colonial attitude, isn't it? To prevent empire, I suppose.
It's also, if you want to look at it from their angle, separating the wheat from the chaff, because the Federation are they only want people who've reached a certain level of technology interacting with them and joining the Federation, and they don't want anyone who, I don't know, who hasn't achieved that level yet. to be on a par with them.
And it's
That's an interesting point. I've not thought of that. Yeah.
And if the Federation go in and start sort of giving them hints and tips, are you then getting a species in too early before they're ready? It might seem like a really obvious thing just to pop down and say, that wheel you've invented, probably circle, not square. But actually, they're going around inventing square wheels. We don't want them coming up and joining our Federation yet.
They have square wheels.
Square wheels up onto
They have square wheels in South Park. They have square wheels in Canada.
And look at that!
Look at them!
Look at the Canadians!
I'd rather have Canada in the Federation than a lot of other places.
Definitely.
But anyway.
Is there sort of a real world parallel in the idea of trying to bring democracy to a country that isn't really structured for democracy, and maybe isn't ready for it, and
there's not a real,
or simply does not,
doesn't want.
Isn't
there's
structured for it.
Yeah.
It's not a real parallel, but in the 19th century, there's definitely a movement of the Europeans went out into the New World and settled there and interacted with the Aboriginal indigenous people there and felt that they had to teach them how to do things properly because they thought which is so that's not a direct analogy, but it does prevent that kind of thing, doesn't it?
It there's the attitude of let's go and introduce civilization to all these backward tribes. But as Picard says in Insurrection, who are we to determine the next course of evolution for these people? And actually, and
also these people, also these most, if not all, Aboriginal cultures where they went already knew these things. It was just it was not the right way to do things. So, I guess a Prime Directive could prevent someone doing that kind of thing because they think it's right.
Yeah.
And is there another sort of real world parallel in America's treatment of Native Americans?
Yeah.
And is if at that time they had the Prime Directive, I guess maybe things would have turned out a bit differently there.
There is an example. Do you hear about there's an island called North Sentinel Island in the Indian Ocean where the natives they're a pre-Neolithic culture, and the Indian government has a rule that you're not allowed to. I think it's technically part of India, and the Indian government has a rule that you're not allowed to go there because the natives will kill you because they don't like outsiders, basically. Yeah. And recently there was a news story where a Christian missionary had gone over there to try and convert them, and they killed him.
The Indian government said
you can't say he wasn't warned.
So it was, but it is, but that government, it was illegal for anybody to go to that island because they didn't want to be. Yeah. They didn't want outsiders.
Yeah.
They're basically like Riker and anyone new coming onto Next Gen, onto the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Hey,
and he's
Colby Hutch. Whoa, he hates that guy.
And it is the Prime Directive, to me as well, the Prime Directive is maybe a bit of a protection tool. Because I always think, in my line of work, if we're doing software releases, we're making changes to a piece of software and putting it into a live environment, it goes through a change management process. Guys. Now look, this change.
What a boring analogy,
guys. But this change management process it's a real ball ache, but it's there to protect someone from making a change and putting it into a live environment and one person causing a massive problem because there are loads of different people are kind of reviewing it. It's the Prime Directive kind of rule to say you protect yourself from being liable for totally destroying a society. Because if you stuck to the rules, then everything was fine.
Picard mentions that in Pen Pals, I think.
I was just going to say, I think the lesson there is that all of Will's analogies should now be put through a management process and screened before.
That's two work-based analogies in 2 episodes.
Sorry, guys,
there's
you're right.
One basic flaw. There's one basic assumption in all of this that if a society attains a level of technology, it also attains a level of, I don't know, balance, societal balance, and I don't know. Everybody's happy. Everybody happy.
That's a good point.
Because
Yeah,
they reach this. But if you know.
And also intellectual sophistication to handle concepts. Which
that's the phrase.
And that's it. So you're using technology as a measure of intellectual sophistication.
Which is
it's bollocks.
It's total bollocks.
Those are dickheads have got iPhones. There it is.
But you pulled yourself back from your boring work analogy.
Thanks.
Well done.
If you give a society, say, the secrets of matter and antimatter power generation too soon, kaboom!
True.
So I think there is a level of that, but maybe there's also like a level of you have to achieve this level before you're really worthy of talking to us. Maybe there's a level of arrogance there.
There is a bit of that going on. You know, I think I'm well known in this podcast of being slightly anti the Federation.
You have some concerns about the Federation.
I do.
They're
happy, smiley,
totalitarian. Dystopian.
Yeah.
You think the Federation is not a utopian vision of the future. You see the dystopia in it.
Yeah, side of it.
Yeah.
Which is your ideal civilization from Star Trek?
Oh gosh.
Klingons?
Klingons, yeah. They are party fun times.
Yeah. Let's drink blood wine and punch each other.
They are one of the most fun.
Which is essentially where we normally are at by the end of our podcasting evenings. Okay. So now we've defined that a little bit. Let's have a little look at original series and some instances where they just shit all over the Prime Directive. So,
as it were.
Yeah. Return of the Archons is one of the earliest examples. So, brief recap of the episode. They find a planet and determine that it is controlled by Landru, and Kirk decides to destroy Landru, the computer that oversees everyone in the society, because he says the culture is stagnant and it's not developing.
Yeah.
That's his personal judgment.
It is. I mean, in fairness, things are a bit messed up on that planet.
Yeah, Landru has robbed that, not intentionally, but Landru has robbed the people of that planet of agency, apart from about 12-hour period called Festival, where they can go absolutely nuts. Now, I love this episode. I think it's great, and it has really good opening. Well, it's all good. It's good all the way through, but the opening's really good. Where they first arrive in that town, it's really creepy and eerie. It reminded me a bit of the Twilight Zone, or as Will mentioned, The Prisoner.
Yeah. Particularly the way they talk about things that they assume that a character would understand, and it's like the Festival.
Are you not ready for Festival?
Yeah. It's the Red Hour.
Yeah, the Red.
You're like, what? That's so The Prisoner.
Come for the festival, eh, ya?
Yes.
Got a place to sleep it off yet? Go round to Rager's house. He's got rooms. But you'll have to hurry. It's almost the Red Hour.
And it's a brilliant scene where it's nighttime and Kirk's looking out of a window and there's just all this madness going on in the town below. It's very very creepy.
I'll be honest, I see where Kirk's coming from.
Yes.
It's fairly horrific. It's like everyone just wanders around with these creepy grins plastered on their face, being, there's no agency. They just... They're the most extreme version of how Gemma sees the Federation.
Yeah, they have no spirit, as Spock says at one point.
Until the point when suddenly massive violence, punching, raping, all sorts of horrible stuff going on, and then everyone just sweeps up and carries on being weird, smiley people again.
It's a bit like The Purge, I guess.
I was going to say that. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Which I've not seen, but I know the concept of it.
When I heard the premise for The Purge, I thought, wow, that's Return of the Archons.
I don't know. I can see why Kirk did what he did, because it seems like this is something that was set up 6,000 years ago, and maybe Landru has 6,000 years of updates that would have made him work better. And it's just like they go into that, they blow a hole. If they'd gone into the room where Landru is, instead of just looking through it and arguing him to death, they'd gone, oh wait, Landru's got 6,000 years of all these updates. That will sort things out.
Java 6.1, Java 6.5.
All those updates are held up in the change management process, I imagine.
Yeah, Landru's just been going postpone for 5 hours, postpone for 5 hours.
Clippy the paperclip saying, I see you've got 6,000 updates to do. So with this one, I can see why Kirk did what he did.
What I want to do is contrast this directly with another episode where Kirk makes almost the exact same argument for his breaking the Prime Directive, and that's the Apple. Yeah. Now on the Apple, they've been down to planet and they describe it as virtually an Eden, like a paradise. And then they find a lovely bunch of people who have got minimal clothing on, just hanging out, being really chilled out. All these guys have to do, living a peaceful life in a luxury paradise, as long as they gather up a bit of fruit and feed it to the big carved monster head called Val, who looks after them.
Yeah.
But literally, there's no violence. There's no anything. Is Kirk's argument. But these people are peaceful. They're happy. So what Kirk makes the exact same argument and justification for doing this because a benevolent computer oversees them. Yeah. But I'm kind of like, well, actually, what's wrong with these guys? Why?
They hate computers in the original series. They have a real fucking problem with computers. But in Return of the Archons, Kirk has a key line, which he uses to justify breaking the Prime Directive. As Spock says to him, Captain,
a Prime Directive of non-interference. That refers to a living, growing culture. Do you think this one is?
And that feels like that's like subsection B, paragraph 2 of the Prime Directive only applies to a living, growing culture. But what does that mean?
How do you define that?
It's subjective, isn't it?
It is a subjective view, I think.
And especially when you look at the Apple, that you could say that's a static culture. It's not going anywhere. But the people are happy.
Yeah,
so
they don't have war.
They're not fear of a red hour or anything like that.
Does there have to be striving? Does there have to be suffering in order to achieve?
Marching to the beat of the drum, struggling and clawing, or whatever Kirk's speech is. I'll tell you what his problem is with this one. After some discussion with the feeders of Val, they find out Val has not permitted any kissing or any other, and he's just like, no kissing. I'm not having this.
I think Kirk was just like a benevolent computer running a society. I know how I can fix that.
I can argue.
I'm going to argue it to death until smoke comes out of it and sparks all come out. That's what Kirk loves doing.
Then he basically leaves a big group of completely innocent people.
Just leaves them all to
on a planet with exploding rocks and poison dart shooting plants without any of the protection they'd previously enjoyed from Val. Yeah, cheers, Kirk. You absolute knob.
Yeah.
So, they can kiss if they survive long enough on this fucking death trap of a planet.
Yeah. So that does feel like it plays into the idea that I think sort of comes from the Prime Directive, is that the Prime Directive is kind of whatever the writer of that episode decides it is. And maybe someone at some point says, what about the Prime Directive? And the writer goes, what if I put in a line that says why the Prime Directive doesn't apply? And they're like, yeah, okay. And there you go, Prince.
Writers meeting over.
Yeah.
So, another episode in the original series that I have a bit of an issue with is Taste of Armageddon. And this one, the Federation's prioritised contacting one of two planets that are at war. They've sent a special ambassador to go and mediate the conflict, and the Enterprise has taken there. And as they approach the first planet, they literally communicate with the Enterprise and say they want no contact. And so the ambassador says, let's go anyway.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Kirk butts into their war, finds out the whole war is played out by computer simulation, so there's no real bombs dropped or property damage. However, if you are classed as killed in the simulated attack, you have to report to a disintegration booth and actually die. So Kirk messes up this whole thing, destroys the computers, and forces the two planets to face the prospect of either making peace or fighting a real war where there will be true devastation as well as deaths.
An actual attack wouldn't have killed any more people than one of their computer attacks, but it would have ended their ability to make war. The fighting would have been over, permanently.
But you didn't know that it would work.
No.
Basically, like, don't have to thank me, guys. I solved this problem. See you later.
I'm just like, where does they specifically requested no contact?
They have a system. The system works for them.
Yeah.
They are growing societies. They are living. They are growing. They are thriving in their own system they've set up. No matter how nutty that system is. Yeah.
I do really like that episode because it's a cool sci-fi idea. It's a great setup. Like, what if war is played out as a simulation? And
I just find it's completely incompatible with the Prime Directive.
I like to think that the other planet that you never actually see, they're lying. They're not killing any of them.
I can't believe we're killing people.
6 we did all
How many
right,
people did you say we had to kill? 50. Let's say we killed 60. We've actually killed 60. Don't believe us. There's no way they can even check. Bloody idiots.
I think they probably do. They'd just be amazed at what you guys were actually killing those people. You're shitting me. You really killed them. You nutters.
Yeah. Oh God, we feel awful. I thought this was all a joke. I thought it was just bants.
Yeah. I thought this was just a really big strategy game.
Sorry, I thought I heard something. Sorry.
You are. So, but yeah, it's just like they barge in for no discernible reason. I can't even remember why it was so important they contact these people, apart from the Federation wants to be seen as the guys who mediated this ongoing war.
Right. Because this war wasn't affecting the Federation. Wasn't impacting anyone outside. So what? It was none of their business, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was none of their business, and they were asked not to come along. So it was kind of a. But the original series did have some fairly fluid concepts.
Yeah.
What was so kind of like they maybe hadn't really pinned that down or weren't even thinking about it at that point. But likewise, when we get to something like Errand of Mercy, now the whole crux of Errand of Mercy is they go to the planet Organia thinking the Organians are like a medieval level society. Turns out they're super advanced, but they didn't know that when they turned up and said, "Oh, we've just been down from our spaceship and we need to tell you some Klingons are coming from their spaceships. They're going to take over, so we've come to help you." They're a medieval society. What the hell?
Yeah, that's it. And that's just because they hate. Is in that episode of it's kind of mentioned a bit of an offhand way. Oh, we're at war with the Klingons now at the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just have a real problem with the Klingons. So they.
My only thing there I can think of is, it's either do that, or let the Klingons take the place, and then I'm not bothered about the Prime Directive. So I kind of sort of is the justification there is like it's going to get broken by the Klingons if we don't. So at least we can help them.
I guess the idea is part of the Prime Directive is the sort of non-interference thing, and they're kind of thinking, well, this society is going to get interfered with anyway by the Klingons. We're better than the Klingons. Let's go and interfere with them better.
I suppose it's kind of a case of discovering that alien life exists, but we just try and keep it minimal. Whereas the Klingons would do in fact put a garrison on the planet and take over. Yeah. So it's kind of like maybe that's the.
What I like about Errand of Mercy is that it totally gets flipped around, and both Kirk and the Klingons are just made to look like idiots because those guys totally had it in hand anyway.
Yeah. In fact, it's not until the last minute that the Organians we are now going to have to intervene with you guys. Yeah. We're going to have to come in and intervene with you lower societies.
Yeah. I guess they sort of have their own Prime Directive of non-interference, and
they don't ultimately, because they do stop a war. They stop going to war. They specifically say, we're not going to let you destroy each other and kill billions.
Even if you have some power that we don't understand, you have no right to dictate to our Federation or our Empire how to handle their interstellar relations. We have the right
to wage war, Captain, to kill millions of innocent people, to destroy life on a planetary scale. Is that what you're defending?
guess one thing in Star Trek, as far as I'm aware, that there isn't an incident in canon which sets the precedent for the Prime Directive, right? Because in Enterprise, they talk about something that will eventually have to happen because of the incidents that they've been involved in.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's anything that's happened that sets up the need for the rule that becomes the Prime Directive.
Nothing seen on screen. No.
And General Order 1, which is the Prime Directive, right? That's in place at the time of Discovery, which is 10 years before the original series. But yeah, we know it's not in place yet at the time of Enterprise. So yeah, somewhere in the middle it happens.
I mean, I guess it's basically the Starfleet trusts its captains, but in case one of them makes a terrible decision, this is in place to at least say, well, we told you not to do this, so if you do it, then we can prosecute you, or we can absolve ourselves of responsibility.
It's like if you're in breach of change management, well, you should put through a change.
Stop talking about that.
Sorry, man. Totally like that.
As we mentioned, General Order 1 and Discovery, shall we discuss the most recent Discovery episode? Although by the time this goes out, there's probably been 2 or 3 more episodes.
At time of recording.
Yes. At time of recording, the most recent episode is, what was it, Sound of Thunder?
Yes.
Yeah. So we get to see Discovery revisit, actually Saru returns home as Discovery visits his home planet, a place Saru not expected to return to. And they do it as part of investigating the red bursts. So to gather some information, Saru and Burnham need to go down to the planet, and they deem it captain's discretion in terms of General Order Number 1 about making contact.
Yeah.
Because thanks to the Barul, the Kelpians are aware of advanced technology and the potential for space travel, and they have a Kelpian who's gone and joined Starfleet. So they're kind of like, it's not going to be a terrible impact on the society, I guess, and it's up to the captain.
That'd be a violation of General Order 1.
Though the Kelpians aren't warp-capable, they've seen warp-capable technology through the Ba'ul, and they know about spaceflight. First contact with the Kelpians by Starfleet is a judgment call, but our mission to investigate these signals would seem to require it.
We can stretch General Order 1, but let's try not to break it in the process.
So, I mean, I can see sides for and against that, but I kind of accept it. Starfleet's come down on the side of let the captain make the discretion, and it is kind of a necessary thing, so they do it. Where I feel that they then completely piss on General Order Number 1 is a little later in the episode, where they've determined that, and this is getting a bit complicated, and if you haven't seen Discovery yet, you probably want to skip ahead a little bit. The Kelpians reach a stage in their life cycle they believed they had to be culled by the Ba'ul, but in fact, the reason that was happening was because the Ba'ul knew the Kelpians would become a predatory race and had nearly previously hunted them to extinction. So in fact, the Kelpians were the apex predator, and the Ba'ul were not. It's a little bit of a flip around from what we'd understood. And then Discovery utilises technology stuff to ensure all the Kelpians suddenly go through this stage of their life cycle and become predators.
Without asking them if they wanted to
never,
do this.
None of them were informed.
No. I guess the difference here is that Saru is a native member of that that species and that society, but he's not in charge.
No,
he's not in
a position to ask for an act on their behalf.
No,
in fact, Saru didn't even know they were about to do it. They started that without him. Even if you counted his sister as a high priest, as someone who could represent that society and ask for help, she didn't.
No.
It wasn't gone through her. And both the Kelpians and the Ba'ul are native to that one planet. Although there is a discrepancy in their technology levels, they're still part of the same ecosystem, part of the same culture. And Starfleet's just barged in, done a technobabble thing, and completely flipped them out. Of course, yes, you can argue morally that what the Ba'ul do with their lies of balance and the way they've set it all up is reprehensible, and I completely get from a moral standpoint why you'd want to flip them around. But it's not their job to.
But also, it's a lie from Saru's point of view, but it isn't a lie. What they have achieved is a kind of balance. Both societies exist in their own right in a balance, and it works now.
If they went to a planet, and people ate meat, would they free the livestock? They would probably go, no, it's just.
Hang on, let's use our technobubble way to give all of the sheep and cows machine guns.
But that sphere could probably do it, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
But you know,
I guess. It's not. Yeah, it's their society. And
it was completely out of place for Discovery to do that. I feel.
Yeah.
And then when the there's a point where the Goa'uld kind of commit genocide, and not kind of, they are going to. They're going to wipe out the all of the villages, and again, they, without even hesitating, they're like, yeah, well, let's stop them. Let's open fire and destroy all of the.
Well, the genocide move is a direct consequence of Discovery's interference.
Yes.
It is, yeah. They're actually, I guess that's by that point they've already interfered. They're actually responsible for that genocide.
You're now trying to undo the consequences of your own interference.
Yeah.
But I did have a query on that one, because they said it was those towers. Each village has one of these sort of tower things, and it was those that were going to then blow up or whatever.
Yeah.
So right, we'll take out the towers, fire a photon torpedo each one. What the hell's going to be left of a village after a torpedo impact in one of those central towers?
Yeah.
It's a lot of torpedoes as well, isn't it?
Yeah, there's like thousands of these villages.
Well, I guess they did say they're not going to be able to take them all out.
Yeah.
But
they need a torpedo complement equal to Voyager's 38, which is to say thousands apparently. But
yeah. But to quote, I just brought up a quote from Pen Pals, which it's a TNG episode where they discuss the Prime Directive. And one of the key things they say is
the Prime Directive is not a matter of degrees. It is an absolute.
I have a problem with that kind of rigidity. It seems callous and even a little cowardly.
Doctor, I'm sure that is not what the lieutenant meant, but in a situation like this, we have to be cautious. What we do today may profoundly affect the future. If we could see every possible outcome,
we'd be gods, which we're not. If there is a cosmic plan, is it not the height of hubris to think that we can or should interfere?
And Pike's just like, fuck it.
They are motivated by their love of Saru. However, they are officers of the.
Yeah, it's not very professional, is it?
Yeah,
I think it's made quite clear that when Saru leaves his planet to join Starfleet, he understands that he is leaving. He is not to return. It's not. This is not Federation making relations with his planet. This is him, because he has shown a certain level of ingenuity with the technology and a desire that they are willing to give him a chance. But once he commits to Starfleet, he's committing to Starfleet. So I don't think he's in a position to say. He has obviously very strong feelings about the situation, but he's not in a position to request or provide that interference through Starfleet.
You're right. What if it was, say, if it was on TNG and it was Worf, who was making a decision about the Klingons, future development of the Klingons. He wouldn't be, as a member of Starfleet, he wouldn't be allowed to, Picard would step in and say, Worf, don't forget you're part of Starfleet.
Well, in fact, he does. If you look at Redemption,
he has. Yeah, that's it.
Ultimately, the only way he can reconcile his desire to help his people is to resign from Starfleet, because prior to that, he's trying to do things to prove his family's innocence and everything. I think it will lead up to Garon taking leadership, and Picard has to rein him in and say, "Your duties as a Starfleet officer don't work with this." That's kind of where that position lies.
So what about Kirk's excuse in Return of the Archons, where he says, "Well, the Prime Directive refers to a living, growing culture. Do you think this is one? And does that apply to the Kelpians?
It applies to
the Baul, the developing technology.
Yeah.
And you know what, the Kelpians are going along. They're not
going extinct, are they? They're not.
No, they are being
oppressed.
culled.
But lots of cultures are oppressed, and the Prime Directive would prohibit involvement
in the original series episode.
The Federation didn't
slaves, and there's oppression there.
The Federation did. I'm sorry, Gemma.
No, don't. Yeah.
You go.
You go.
The Federation didn't get involved in Bajor when the Cardassia occupied it.
No.
It's the where I fall on the whole issue with the Kelpians and Baul is I think they probably made the morally correct decision to help an oppressed species. I don't think they made the Prime Directive correct decision.
But they don't have a Baul crew member. Well, if they had a Baul crew member, then at least the Baul crew member would be a bit oily. We're going to get crewman Czar from his oil pool.
I think we should destroy that Kelpian. Is what he would say.
His pointy. Yeah.
I know, he talked with his hands a lot, that guy, which given he had big, long, spiky, drippy hands, was a bit weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I just... It seems like they did that because one of their friends is a Kelpian.
No, I just find the fact that none of them even reflected on the ramifications of this with General Order 1.
Yeah.
They mentioned it in a completely different area early on about contact. But then what they did was completely flip around the course of a society.
Yeah.
And no one bats an eyelid.
Yeah. And presumably now they're just going to leave.
Oh yeah.
Because his sister's going to look after it. She'll sort it out. Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Just a whole bunch of Kelpians are going to shoot darts out the side of their head.
At least with Return of the Archons, it is Kirk that makes that decision. He is the captain of that ship, so the decision sort of rests with him. And he's made that judgment. Whereas in this, I don't know. Yeah, like you were pointing out, it seems to be a bit... It's maybe not even the captain's judgment. It's just that people have come up with this idea to use that old sphere that carked it. Just and that sphere's probably going... this is not what I intended. Yeah. So I do think that the civilization in Return of the Archons wasn't progressing. It had been caught in some sort of weird computer feedback loop where it was sort of stagnating, perhaps. Whereas at least there was some form of balance on this planet, and it's incredibly reckless to interfere with that.
Yeah.
And I was
species is been left in a state that it has no knowledge of, has no understanding of this state that is now left.
I mean, I guess it was the Red Angel that came in and did an EMP.
Yeah.
But that was to stop the genocide.
Yeah.
But the Red Angel brought them there in the first place, so one would assume that it meant that to happen.
At this point in the series, we don't know the Red Angel's motives, so it's very little we can ascribe to that. But regardless, I don't think. Well, probably the Red Angels led us there for a reason. Is a good way to completely flip off of the Prime Directive like that, because that was reckless and crazy. And
on the flip side, though, it did make for a compelling episode.
Oh, it was a brilliant episode.
What made it interesting is we don't see that sort of massive change in Star Trek very often. Usually the line is we're not going to interfere. It's quite unusual. It was pretty epic to see like a massive kind of societal change, and I love the big barrel thing coming out of the ocean. That was really
like
epic.
a city ship or whatever it is.
Well, the thing is, if in 2-3 series Kelpians have completely wiped out the Baul, taken their technology out, and taken their new fearless and aggressive motives out into the stars and become an aggressor race.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
What if it's Pike's going to be like, whoops?
What if Pike's injuries are a result of maybe that he's involved in the first battle with the Kelpians because he's kind of responsible ground, and he that's how he gets his injuries. Oh, I'd like that. Yeah.
But this is a potential consequence of their actions. I'm thinking, it's not ridiculous to think that in time the Kelpians could become an aggressor species.
Maybe
from
the
the way
Bow.
I think
Bow.
It would be
arrived above them, and they were doing the universal service.
Exactly. It would be a really interesting direction for Discovery to take if in future episodes, Pike's like, made a really bad decision that day. Actually,
sometimes I'm too nice.
Yeah. But I think that would make me enjoy this episode a whole lot more, knowing where it goes. I guess we don't know where it goes yet.
No, and this is one of the things I always be very, very cautious about judging episodes of Discovery, because the larger story, until that's complete, I think it's very difficult to judge an episode on individual merits.
Certainly, I enjoyed season 1 on rewatch a lot better than a lot more than I enjoyed it first time around, and I can't really quite quantify why, but I did.
I think because you understand each small piece's part in the larger tapestry.
Yeah.
So and that makes it more satisfying, probably.
Yeah.
But we're not discussing the merits or not of Discovery's ongoing story.
Yeah.
We're talking Prime Directive.
We are.
We're venturing to TNG era. Now, some of us have put ourselves through the nightmare of watching Justice.
Oh my god. I don't think I'd seen Justice since I was probably about 8 years old, watching it on its original run, because why would you ever want to revisit that episode out of choice? But we decided it was time to do that. And wow, what an episode
If
Justice
ever there's an episode that I feel was very reflective of Gene Roddenberry's vision and personality, it's when they come across a peaceful planet where everything is serene and everyone just has sex with each other all the time.
Shall we go there now or remain and play?
Play?
At love. Unless you don't enjoy that.
Perhaps you do.
Yes. Do you like to love? Right?
Do you know how to run?
We like running and fucking on this planet. It's basically running and fucking and playing ball.
Yeah,
that's all we do.
Yeah, as long as we can run around and penetrate each other, we're happy.
Yeah.
My word.
Why are they? How? Prime Directive wise, are they just saying these guys are so into running and fucking that they won't even notice that we've arrived on a spaceship?
The fact that they even beam down and introduce themselves in the start.
That's what I was thinking.
Because there's no evidence that
they were just desperate for shore leave.
For the benefit of those not viewing this on holiday, I'm pulling a confused face because I can't even articulate my confusion about why they just beam down and talk to them.
Yeah, they're like, because I think people have been, like, some people have been down there already, haven't they? Geordie and Riker, I think.
Yeah, and
Tasha.
And he's like, the dudes are rocking epic camel toe. Everyone's rocking camel toe.
I've never seen a man with camel toe before that episode.
Riker's just like, we've just come down for an initial recon mission, and I've had sex with 4 people.
And even Worf.
I didn't even take my trousers off.
I literally beamed down and I'm having sex.
Even Worf's like, nice planet.
One thing I would say,
very complimentary.
One thing I would say about it's the Edo, isn't it? They are a Nazi's dream.
Yeah, they are. They're all blonde.
They're all blonde. They're all blonde and strapping and beautiful and perfect.
And they will follow rules to the absolute letter.
Exactly. And I think there's a bit later on in the episode where like a weird bubble kind of comes onto the ship, and I read in an early draft of the script, the bubble had like a little square moustache, and it was like, why have you come to the planet with my beautiful blonde people who loves the running and the fucking,
and also the playing ball to a lesser extent.
Oh, they love ball so much.
Not as much as the fucking, and also the running.
the Edo also have a very weird rotating area where laws apply.
Yeah, they do.
Basically, at any given point, there's one small area where all laws are punishable by death.
It's like crop rotation, but punishment rotation, I suppose.
Even if it's something as minor as keep off the grass.
Yeah.
So when Wesley Crusher falls onto a tiny greenhouse and
He makes
smashes
noops.
it just happens that out of a whole planet is that point designated punishment zone. To the point where when the other crew come up and interfere with the immediate execution of Wesley, the guys coming to do the execution say, it's lucky that 2 minutes ago this was not the punishment zone. Otherwise your interfering would mean I'd kill you as well.
I also love that the guys who are policing the death zone, they're not next to the death zone. They're somewhere off running and fucking. Off in the distance.
To some extent playing ball.
Jogging up. Oh, I hear someone's.
I hope they're careful of those lethal injections they're carrying around. One slip, and that could be awkward.
They're like a weird, sexy Judge Dredd.
At no point does Wesley apologise for smashing up the.
I think he does.
When they come running over, he says, "Oh, I'm all right. Don't worry about me.
I'm okay, guys. It's all right. I'm okay."
It's like, broken precious flowers.
It's very easy with this episode to get diverted into the other bits, but the actual Prime Directive point is that it's felt that the Edo's claim to put Wesley to death becomes a Prime Directive matter because it's their internal laws.
Yeah.
Even though, is the Prime Directive not broken by Wesley being there with the away team? I'm not sure where we fall on that. So they can either take Wesley away, break the Prime Directive, or let them execute Wesley.
There's a point where the Edo even invite them to do that. They basically say, you could just rescue him. We won't mind.
No, but they don't say it like that. They don't say it like that, though, do they? They say, you're so superior, you could just come down here and take him any time you like.
We are not yet as advanced as they are. And since you are advanced in other ways too, I suggest you use your superior powers to rescue the Wesley boy. We will record him as a convicted criminal out of our reach. An advanced person who luckily escaped the barbarism of this backward little world.
I'm too busy doing those things.
Well, it boils down to the weird extra-dimensional Edo god.
Yeah.
Which is not fully explored, and sadly, there's kind of an interesting concept in there that they don't sort of flesh out. But basically, the Edo god would have the power to restrain the Enterprise or let them go. And it ultimately comes down to, well, we've said the Prime Directive is really important, and if we break it, those guys might think we're dicks and stop us. Or we might be able to convince them that it's okay to break the Prime Directive. So then it boils down to Riker just shouts out to the air, when has justice ever been as simple as a rule book? And the Edo god is like, fair point, off you go.
Yeah. But Picard has a really good line actually before that, which was almost like the redeeming point of this dog shit episode.
It's just a shame that didn't convince the Edo god. It was Riker's rule book
it was. No, you're right. But Picard says,
there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute. Even life itself is an exercise in exceptions.
When has justice ever been as simple as a rule book?
I really liked that. I thought, that is basically right. Like laws, even the law of you shouldn't do a murder on someone isn't an absolute, because you can do a murder at wartime if the murder that you do is the enemy. Like, that is legal murder. There's always an exception to a rule. There's always like some context, and what Picard's saying is absolutely right. But also, he's completely dissing the Prime Directive in that line. He's basically saying, there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute, but the Prime Directive is meant to be absolute. Yeah. So it's an interesting line, and it's contradictory to things that he says subsequently about the Prime Directive.
It is,
but I like it.
I also feel that when has justice ever been as simple as a rule book? Yeah, most justice systems really hinge on a set of rules.
Yeah.
Isn't that the entire point?
Yeah, but they can be.
But then a legal system is also kind of there are always precedents which changes rules and I think Riker is right.
I just think maybe it's too pat a statement.
Yeah.
For the Edo gods, extra-dimensional beings beyond our comprehension, to go, okay.
Yeah, to go, oh, no, I've not thought of that before.
Well, maybe they saw the different levels in that statement.
Yeah. I feel there's very little question over whether they're going to break the Prime Directive, and more a question of how can we do it on a technicality?
Yeah.
Essentially, and that kind of...
Which makes for an incredibly dull episode, I have to say. I think this is the worst episode of Star Trek that I've seen in a long time, and I have a high tolerance for terrible episodes. But even so, I still think there's an interesting kind of spark of a story actually in Justice, and I think that's very telling by the way that we've discussed it for so long. Like even such a dire episode has enough worth that we can commit some time to talk about it. I think that's a great thing about Star Trek. I think that even at its lowest, it still can spark some debate and interest.
When Next Gen began airing, that was literally my first exposure to Star Trek. So this episode constitutes my first exposure to the Prime Directive. Yeah. So all my Prime Directive thoughts essentially stem from this episode.
And you avoided walking on the grass whenever you saw that sign.
Very near it, or tiny greenhouses.
This is completely irrelevant to the Prime Directive, but there's a bit in this episode that I thought was hilarious where the ship sensors are scanning this Edo god. And Picard says to Geordi, why don't you take a real look, a proper look?
So Geordi's to go look out the window.
Yeah, what a weird moment. He sends the one blind member of the crew to have a look out of a window. I think, what is he thinking? But he's got his visor. I think it's the visor thing. Is that it? But
what can the visor see that isn't built into the sensor suite of the most advanced starship of the fleet?
Does Picard completely distrust the ship sensors?
I can't believe they put some sensor capability in that small hairband side. They didn't think to stick on this giant starship.
Yeah. Why is he sending the pilot to kind of look out the window as well at that point?
Yeah.
Make
sure you're parked.
Yeah, a weird moment in a weird episode.
So, staying on the Next Gen, there's two episodes I want to talk directly about because I think they are a bit of a contrast in the crew's attitudes. That's Pen Pals and Homeward. Pen Pals is a Series 2 episode where Data has got an amateur radio hobby going on.
This is a great scene. Sorry to interrupt so early, but there's a great scene where Data's just doing something like it is a hobby, isn't it? Him and the Wolf have a little nerdy conversation about what he's doing.
Data's got his shit out all over the bridge.
Wolf trips over it.
He's left his stuff all over the floor. This is not.
Data's like, I will take this back to my quarters. It's like, yeah, well, you should.
Why you
brought it here?
He's into like ham radio, right? He's got his little ham radio operation going on.
So I've got a change management conference call to join.
The thrust of Pen Pals is Data's little amateur radio hobby means he accidentally makes contact with a small child from a world that is on the verge of exploding or something.
Yeah.
And he then breaks the Prime Directive by responding to her communications. And then they end up in a situation where they essentially decide to help save the planet. They argue a technicality that the child is a native of that planet who's entered a plea for help.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing that they...
I think that's the technicality. It's a reach on their part, but they go with it, and then they use their technology to save the planet.
This episode has a something that's relatively rare for TNG. I think there's conflict within the main crew. There's a great scene in the ready room where they argue this issue, and they're pretty divided. I would say
Riker and Worf are very in favour of Prime Directive is an absolute, and they make the point that what if there's a plan for the universe? It's not our place to intervene. Are these people fated to die? That's essentially Riker's thing, and like LaForge is like, well, if that's the plan, it's a rubbish one.
So what are you saying? That the Dremons are fated to die?
I think that's an option that we should be considering.
Considered, and rejected.
If there is a cosmic plan, are we not a part of it? Our presence at this place, at this moment in time, could be a part of that fate.
Right, and it could be part of that plan that we interfere.
Well, that eliminates the possibility of fate.
But, Commander, the Dremons are not a subject for philosophical debate. They are a people.
So we make an exception in the deaths of millions.
Yes.
And is it the same situation if it's an epidemic and not a geological calamity?
Absolutely.
What about a war? If generations of conflict is killing millions, do we interfere?
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Well, he also helps himself to the buffet.
This is another thing. It's not in the ready room. It's in Picard's quarters for some reason.
But I love
and Picard's laid out snacks. Yeah, there's a great bit where Geordie's just chowing down. I really liked that. That was distracting though. But I think it's a great scene in the episode. It's a really well written and really interesting debate that they have.
Yeah, I like it's Pulaski and LaForge versus Riker and Worf essentially. Well,
and Pulaski
has an involvement.
Yeah.
But Picard's just sort of letting both sides come through before he goes for a decision, isn't he?
Yeah. Worf's really harsh in that.
But Pulaski kind of calls him on that and says he's callous and cowardly.
Yeah,
she does.
She's not intimidated by Worf.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where I can't remember who it is. I think someone says just want to save a friend, and Worf says Data's friend.
Data's friend is going to die. That means something.
To Data.
Oh, go, nice one, Worf. That's kind, isn't it?
Because she's friends with Data.
Yeah. It's not it's Data's fucking problem, not ours.
That's
basically
true.
What he said.
And there's a really horrible bit later on as well when they've made this decision and Data takes Sarjenka onto the ship, and O'Brien says, well, "What about that?" And what an awful thing to say.
She's right there.
Where are you going? To the bridge. And you're going to take that?
Don't leave me here. Please don't leave me here.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure I'd heard that right.
No, I did a double take of that bit. What?
And
Miles.
Picard is absolutely horrified when he discovers there's a child on the bridge. He won't even look at it.
He's not bothered about the Prime Directive violation.
His children on the bridge problem resurfaces in this episode.
Yeah, right back from the pilot episode.
He's brought a child on my bridge.
Won't even look her in the eye. He's absolutely disgusted. The idea of a young person. God, he's like an old Star Trek fan, I guess.
Doesn't like new people coming in with their new series.
Bloody millennials.
Then in Series 7 we get Homeward, where they respond to a distress call from Worf's foster brother, Nikolai, who's doing the secret observer thing on a early
They love that too.
Oh, yeah. And their planet's doomed, and the crew are like, "No, well, shit happens. Come on, then, let's get Nikolai up and leave him to it. Leave him to be wiped out. It'll be fine."
Yeah. Picard has a line where he's like,
This is one of those times when we must face the ramifications of the Prime Directive and honor those lives which we cannot save.
I find no honor in this whatsoever, Captain.
I really like that line. That's great.
There's a conference room scene where Nikolai's trying to argue his point, and the only person on the Next Gen crew who in any way feels that he's got a point is Dr. Crusher.
Yeah.
And when you compare that to the scene that we've discussed from Pen Pals, where the crew are really divided and there's very passionate arguments, it's just like Homeward makes the crew, our heroes from the show, look a bit horrible.
Do you know it does? I think Picard is a little bit out of character in this episode. He's just a bit too willing to accept the death of a whole species. I don't think he's quite as
created
callous
a
as
little
that.
bit of headcanon about that, though, didn't we?
Did we?
That he's been pulled up by the brass.
That's right, because there's an episode where I can't remember which one it is, but they reference the fact that he's done 9 Prime Directive violations already. Which admiral is it that tells him that? Is it in the drumhead?
Nechayev. Oh no, that'd be Admiral Sati.
Captain, do you believe in the Prime Directive?
Of course.
In fact, it's Starfleet's General Order Number 1, is it not?
Your point, Admiral.
Would it surprise you to learn that you have violated the Prime Directive a total of 9 times since you took command of the Enterprise?
Yeah. I think there's a point where I'm sure they say he's done 9
So he's treading carefully then, do you reckon?
That's what we think. We think he's been thoroughly spanked over his actions in Pen Pals. And he's like, I think he's been told, this is your last warning. You breach the Prime Directive again, you are done. Yeah. And he hates being the idea of being a junior officer, as we know from Tapestry. So I think he is. I think he's towing the line. That's our headcanon.
Kind of. But Geordie's not bothered now. Where's Geordie's passionate response gone?
Yeah.
Is it because there was no snacks in that meeting?
Maybe his blood sugar was really low. He was just tired.
And then, because when Nikolai forces the issue and secretly beams the village population up into his little holodeck thing, everyone's mad at him.
Yeah.
I mean, after Pen Pals, everyone's like, nice one, good idea, good thinking. Not much we can do about it now. We're going to have rehome them. Starfleet's not going to condone us just killing a bunch of people, shoving them out the airlock, are they? So let's go with it and just say whoops, and we can just blame the civilian. Brilliant. No, they're all really cross.
Yeah. They're like, you're such a dick for saving, a small village, the last
of a species.
In fact, they all call him Dickolai behind his back.
I think they do. Yeah,
it's childish, but they can be childish, particularly to people who aren't normally in the crew.
They call Reg Barclay broccoli, don't they?
Yeah, so it's not
a very
unkind nickname.
No, it's not a witty nickname, is it?
And they've been observing that culture as well, haven't they? So it's a bit cold to observe a culture and then go, whoa, they're going to die. Let's just clear off.
Yeah. Oh well. Shrug shoulders.
Because I don't think preserving the existence of a species or a culture at that level. I don't think that breaches the Prime Directive. I think you're there at that time. For whatever reason, you are there at that time, and you have a decision to make.
I think that's a significantly lesser breach than, say, switching around the apex predator of a bloody planet.
Definitely. And as Picard says, there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute. Even life itself is an exercise in exceptions. This is a case where they need to make an exception, and it's kind of obvious to everyone, except for the crew who don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Until the hand is forced by Nikolai.
If I was on the crew and they had done that, I would say, I don't want any part of this. I resign.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty fair that Nikolai's actions are pretty fair. I think he probably thinks, well, this could be the end of my career, but also who cares? I'm going to save the lives of all these people. So isn't that worth, if the cost of that is my career, okay, fine, I'll do it.
He then goes on to get one of them pregnant.
Yeah, well, it turns out he already had.
Whoops. Kind of feel like his overall plan was probably to stay with them anyway, so career-wise he's not bothered.
Yeah, but
he's already got one.
How is he going to explain the...
Well, I went native, but I went a bit too native.
How's he going to explain the whole differences in that child? Because he's maintained that he is one of theirs.
He's probably going to blame a godlike action because they are quite spiritual people.
Yeah. He'll blame it on Worf. Bloody seer. Can't believe he's messed up my kid.
Although,
yeah, of all the people you want to do improv, Worf's the last one, I guess. But he does all right, to be fair.
He's Simon of the Forge. But actually, if Nikolai did blame the baby's altered features on a religious intervention, doesn't that make him like Descartes in that episode of DS9 where Descartes has a baby with a Bajoran woman and claims it's a sign from the Paris?
Oh, that's where he runs it, where he has a cult.
Yeah.
That's a really good episode.
It's good. Yeah. But it's nothing to do with the Prime Directive.
Yes,
so,
true.
Another good one is 30 Days. However, I didn't get around to watching it. I can't remember that well because I'm not a particularly big fan of Tom Paris. So,
do you know? I really like 30 Days.
May I just go do a slight rewind?
You can
there's an episode of TNG called The Hunted, where the Enterprise are at a planet called Argosia, I think, and Argosia is petitioning to join the Federation, and the Enterprise gets involved in an incident on that planet where someone's like an escaped prisoner, I think, and they end up kind of finding out that Angosia's kind of got separate facilities, almost like a prison facility for its military veterans who they use in the war.
They literally create super soldiers,
and in that,
and then they couldn't reintegrate them into society, so just stuck them in a prison.
And at the end of that episode, Picard decides to let things just play out. And I'm not sure about that because they did get involved. They did get involved in something and then just let it run its course. Whereas I'm not sure of whether that was the right thing to do, because
we've had this argument on the podcast before. I can't remember which episode, but we've actually. I felt that Picard was completely justified in his actions there.
I do know what you mean. I just think that they did get themselves involved as soon as they agreed to help capture the vessel. So they became a part of a sequence of events that led to something.
Yeah.
I don't think they did a very good job vetting the Angosia. They did a poor job vetting them because I don't think Angosians hid those facilities. It's just something that perhaps I don't know how. I mean, I don't know. We don't get into that in the episode, but I do feel that was an incident where they arrived at a planet and something happened and they let it play out rather than assist and restore the status quo. Whether restoring the status quo was the right thing to do, I don't know. I mean,
is it up to them to restore?
I don't know, because they got involved. They got involved before Angosia was part of the Federation.
But they were pulled into it though, weren't they?
True, but they didn't have to. They didn't have to help capture that vessel. They could have said, "Well, this is an internal matter." I mean, I don't think that. I don't really think that they did the wrong thing. I just think that they did get involved in something. They did sort of interfere, and they left it interfered with.
But they interfered at request of the government.
Yeah.
And I understand your point that the government they continued to request help, and Picard then basically hid behind the Prime Directive to say, "It's your problem. You go sort it out."
Yeah.
But I think there's levels of understanding of the problem.
Yeah.
They respond to the one request thinking it was relatively straightforward. By the end of it, when they understood, they said, "This really is your problem to sort out, and you can't rely on us." So, but as I know we've had this debate before.
Yeah. Anyway, back to 30 Days.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is an episode where Paris is a little bit of a liability. And I think it's a good episode, actually. I really like it. He's in the brig, and the whole episode is framed by he's putting together a letter to his father to explain why he's in the brig and why he's been demoted to ensign.
Lieutenant Thomas Eugene Paris, I hereby reduce you to the rank of ensign, and I sentence you to 30 days solitary confinement. Take Ensign Paris to the brig.
I know the way.
And they come across a really interesting planet, which is it's like a water planet, an ocean planet, and it turns out that this society is they're sort of destroying their own planet by
well, they were nomads, weren't they? They were sort of nomadic, and then they found the ocean.
Yeah.
And so the ocean is originally it's very old, isn't it? It's hundreds of thousands of years old.
There's some sort of ancient technology that they find deep in the ocean that only the Delta Flyer can get down to. That is, I don't know. It seems to have been sort of controlling.
Yeah,
keeping the ocean planet together, basically.
Yeah, and at the moment they arrive to this world, they meet the Manayans, and the Manayans saying they eventually reveal that they're having some trouble with their planet, with containment of the ocean.
Yeah.
And they go down, and they eventually realise that the Manayans' presence there, they have some sort of, is it like a mining sort of facility? Do they mine oxygen from the water?
Yeah.
And that's putting too much stress on the original machinery that maintains the kind of the constitution of the world.
Yeah. And then basically they come up with some solutions for how they can get around this, but it becomes apparent that the government of that society isn't really going to do anything about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of bureaucracy.
Yeah. So Paris takes it on himself to team up with this scientist guy, and they're just going to go and blow up all the mining facilities. So he's basically going to do like a direct attack on the sort of on the mining facilities of this species, and Janeway's willing to fire on him and potentially kill him if she has to stop him, and then he gets caught and demoted. I guess the Prime Directive, this isn't a pre-warp civilization, I suppose, so the Prime Directive doesn't apply directly, but the spirit of the Prime Directive of non-interference does apply, and it feels like a Prime Directive episode, because it's a very much, we're not sure whether we should be with Paris or not. Like, there's no easy answers here. Should
culture's made a decision.
Yeah, they're interfering at a point when the culture has said they don't want help.
Members of that species can't take that action without the use of the Federation technology Paris is willing to hijack and to supply to them. So I think in terms of that, he's gone against the wishes of the culture, and he's performing actions that could not be performed without Federation technology. Yeah, absolutely, that's a violation. But I like that there's a violation as a consequence.
Yeah, actually,
because it would be
that.
very easy to have Janeway routinely violate the Prime Directive, and of course, being in the Delta Quadrant, there's no consequence. So it's a nice way. It's good in this case that someone else does it, and Janeway then has to bring about the consequence.
And the whole episode is framed around that consequence, basically, and then explaining how it is that Paris got into that situation. I think it's a really good episode, actually. I like it a lot. Also, the ocean planet just looks really cool.
It's a brilliant concept, actually.
Yeah. It's totally different from most planets we encounter on Star Trek, so it's got that going for it. It's a really interesting episode, and it's it's good to see the Prime the spirit of the law of the Prime Directive is sort of upheld in Paris's punishment here. Yeah.
Okay. Has anyone got any other thoughts on violations of the Prime Directive?
I guess in Into Darkness, the Kelvinverse film, at the beginning of that, they interfere, don't they?
They absolutely interfere. Yeah, that's a good one. I can't believe I didn't put that in my notes. Kirk takes it upon himself to save the it's the planet Nibiru. I don't know what you call the natives, Nibirans or
something like that.
But yeah, they both by taking them out of the danger zone of an erupting volcano, and by having Spock detonate a device that will freeze the volcano, and then he exposes the Enterprise to them, so they then begin to worship it as a god or something like that.
I guess the intention was to remain was to do it without being discovered.
Intervene without.
Much like the pilot of the very first episode of Discovery, we see that's what they're doing there, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're interfering, but they are doing it kind of in secret. So I guess that wasn't.
That's kind of again. Why is that not addressed as a violation? Because
yeah.
Yeah, so
they just don't get caught in that scenario.
So that's it. If you don't get caught, it's fine.
Yeah, because what are they doing? They're bringing back the water to that planet. The wells have all dried up, and they find a way to bring that.
Had
back.
there been something had happened in that planetary system, right? Something had happened in that system.
Some ecological thing. Some sciencey thing.
But I think the thrust of something like, say, Homewood shows us that if you strictly follow the Prime Directive, an ecological disaster that results in an extinction event, just got to let that happen.
Yeah, and that's the same with pen pals. That's the same scenario until a cute little girl says, "Oh, help me, please," and then that's a different story.
Yeah, ecological events, leave them be. It's fine. Computers that span kissing.
Oh my god!
Get in there.
Yeah. But I think it'd be worth giving an honorary mention to. I can't remember what the name of the episode is, but it's another great episode of Voyager where Voyager is caught in the top end of an atmosphere of a planet where time is running at a different rate.
Yeah.
But it's not their fault. They accidentally. Cause a Prime Directive problem, and a society.
Is it? It's not Eye of the Beholder, is it? No.
No.
It's not Timeless, is it?
No, Timeless is the one where they crash in ice and you see old
American. But what happens is that Voyager's stuck in the atmosphere of this planet,
and shape an entire culture.
They do
because of the sped up evolution of that planet. In a matter of days, they go through, aeons of development. And
Voyager becomes goes from being a sort of a religious symbol. It shapes all of their stories and their religion, and then eventually they get the technology to go up and visit Voyager. But it's not Janeway's fault that they're in breach of the Prime Directive. There, it's an accident.
Yeah.
Blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye. That's it. But it's a really good episode. It's a really cool idea, and it's a great example of the repercussions of ignoring the Prime Directive. Not that they don't intentionally ignore the Prime Directive, but it just goes to show what that feels like. That could be, like we were talking about in Into Darkness, when that primitive species see the Enterprise, and we see them drawing in the sand, don't we? The shape of the Enterprise. That feels like that's a similar idea to that Voyager episode. Actually, what an impact that could have.
I guess with the Prime Directive, from the episodes we discussed, it seems like there are a variety of scenarios. There's ones where a society is immediately at peril. If you don't do something, it will be destroyed.
Yeah.
And then there are other ones where this society's something's affecting it, that if you change it, it might thrive. It seems to be stuck, or it's being oppressed for some reason.
Or it's doing something that you don't.
Or potentially. Yeah. I mean, I think with situations where you have the chance to save a people, it must be very difficult. And I would hate to be part of anything where you abandon someone or a group of people just because the rules say you should.
I think we get to many situations where what's correct for the Prime Directive may not feel what's morally correct.
Yes.
I think that's what makes for the interesting storytelling, is having the characters weigh that up. And then actually, when we refer back to that Discovery episode, it's kind of almost a missed opportunity that they didn't have a little bit more consideration around the actions they take.
Yeah. The outcome could have still been the same, but I think we could have swallowed it a lot better if they'd have seriously debated.
I want to see some serious agonising over it. I want to see the crew debate it in impassioned arguments, preferably with snacks.
Definitely.
Okay, well, I think unless anyone's got anything else, we can wrap up our view of breaking the Prime Directive.
Certainly, because we have a part 2 to get onto.
We do indeed.
Which is rigidly adhering to the Prime Directive.
It is.
Really rigidly.
Yeah,
It's a bit weird.
Yeah,
so this is
justice too many times.
So this is the end of part 1.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you join us again for part 2, where we'll be discussing, as Will said, rigidly.
Keep staying rigid.
I don't know why I said that, but I said it. I can't unsay it unless I edit.
You repeatedly said rigidly, in fact.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
okay. Well, thank you for listening. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Do you realize how incredible this is? It's tradition!
You ever noticed her bum? What? Her bum.
Oh no!
I will say fewer things.
Okay.
Enough of this self-indulgence.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, our website is www.lowerdexradio.co.uk. You can reach us on the Twitters at 10Backward, 10 being the number and backward being the word backward. We're also on Facebook at www.facebook.com/10Backward podcast. You can also email us at crew@lowerdexradio.co.uk. On a personal, individual level, my Twitter is @WiltHurland. Rick Everson's Twitter is @TrekFanRick. And Rick Palmer's Twitter is @Mr. Imhotep. Hi, thank you again for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you might consider supporting us. We now have a Patreon where people can pledge small amounts to fund our ongoing projects like keeping our website up to date, new audio equipment as we're going along, and potentially opportunities to expand our content. You can go look at this at patreon.com/lowerdexradio. If you don't feel you can donate but would still like to support us, we would love it if you could subscribe to us on however you get your podcasts, through iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or we're on various third-party apps. And if you could leave us a review on any of those, that would be fantastic and we'd be very appreciative. Thanks again for listening, and please tune in for more podcasts from the 10 Backward crew.
Laddie, don't you think you should rephrase that?
10 Backward.
10 Backward.
Oh, well, now we're all a little less secure in our moral certitude.